Welcome all. Can you hear me? पाठक साहेब आपण ऐकू येतोय का? आवाज ऐकू येतोय का?
हो हो व्यवस्थित ऐकू येत आहे. यू प्लीज कॅरी ऑन.
एक मिनिट. Welcome all to this unique lecture on trees. Natesh sir will be introducing you to the various iconic trees. Natesh sir is a student of a dear student of Sane madam, and he is still in regular touch with Sane madam. Whenever I go to Sane madam, I always get a reference. Natesh sir had called or they had discussed something like that. Natesh sir is also batchmate for Ganekar sir and Kajale sir. Natesh sir is an eminent personality in the field of biosciences. He has received Biospectrum Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution towards taking the Indian biosciences sector to new heights. There is a plant species, Aponogeton nateshi, which has been named in his honor, and we are very lucky to have such an august personality to introduce us to the heritage trees of India. I'll request Natesh sir to please start his presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all of you. And I'm very happy to be among this community of very committed nature lovers. I remember that 4 years ago, I was there to give a talk in person, and nothing can match giving a talk in person. Of course, we are living in very difficult, different times today, and probably this is the best that we could make through the electronic medium, and therefore I'm still happy to meet all of you through this medium. The topic that I have chosen for today's talk is trees of life, trees of death, and everything in between, with the subtitle, A Search for Iconic Trees of India. Now, let me straight away start this talk. India's tree resource base, that's we have about 2,500 trees species. Many of these are economically or ecologically important for the country. And whenever we talk of trees, we usually talk of species of trees, and very few people look at individual trees, which are very important. However, certain individuals among those trees have assumed cultural, religious, historical, or other significance. And they are inseparable components of our national heritage. And therefore, they become what I call iconic trees, and they stand out in some exceptional or extraordinary or an uncommon manner, and are therefore recognized by local communities as very different and special. But with very rare exceptions, they are mostly unknown outside the region. If I asked you how many great trees, individual trees, could you name in India, you would probably tell me we know the Bodhi tree, or we know the great banyan tree of Calcutta, and you may name a couple of other trees, but I'm sure most of us don't recall individual trees that are heritage trees or iconic trees. Even so, wherever such trees are, these champions are a priceless national resource. They should be treasured, nurtured, and admired by us, and handed over to the next generation for further admiration and protection. Now, Developed economies have shown a lot of interest in exceptional trees. This interest is fueled through various means. They have produced very attractive books, heritage trees of the world, heritage trees of Europe, heritage trees of London, etc., etc. There are many citizen science projects in which citizens participate to name individual trees that are very outstanding. Many projects on ecotourism depend upon such heritage trees, and people go to see them during vacations, during weekends, and so on, to admire and to draw inspiration from nature. Many countries, such as the UK, USA, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, European Union, they all maintain what are known as champion tree registers. Now, people can nominate individual trees to such national registers or state registers, and a committee of experts will be sent to verify the claims. And if the tree is found to be having the characters that were described by the the person who nominates them, they are then included in the champion tree registers or heritage tree registers. And therefore, these registers are dynamic and keep changing every 6 months. Even countries, smaller countries, which are nearer to us like Singapore or even Vietnam, they have programs on heritage trees. India does not have any major program on heritage trees. It is known now that about 9% of our tree species in the world are under various kinds of threats, threats, and therefore they need to be conserved. Now, in our own country, India is a very ancient country, but we don't maintain meticulous records of remarkable trees. Studies on association of tree species with gods, saints, and such things are known, but very few individual tree champions are identified, recorded, and written about in our country. Certain trees attract tourists and pilgrims, as I mentioned, for example, the Bodhi tree or the great banyan tree, etc. But they are poorly known outside India and even outside the region of occurrence in many cases. The government of India, the Ministry of Environment and Forests, instituted an award called the Mahavriksha Puraskar in 1993-94 to recognize individuals or organizations which preserved and protected trees of notified species. 15 such trees were notified, and the last award was given in 1997. After that, there have been no records. Now in India, the competing claims for the largest or the oldest, etc., are mainly through newspapers. We don't have scientific studies to determine either age or dimensions, or these are not adequately put into the public domain so that the people can talk about them or admire them or appreciate such things. Some states, for example, Tamil Nadu and Gujarat, have brought out official books on heritage trees of their states. Sikkim has brought out an official memorandum which lists trees which are larger than 25 feet in girth. Other than that, most states have not paid great attention to maintaining records or registers of trees that are of heritage value in their own states or provinces. My work, and I have been working on this project for the last 6.5 years or so, it will celebrate individual trees that are iconic from various parts of India, and it will link individual trees to botany, history, culture, and people. And included in this will be trees that are not age-wizened patriarchs, or those that remind us of historic events or personalities. They may be gentle, wish-fulfilling giants. And there are also those that bring back grim memories of gory deaths and dark punishments and so many others. And that's where the title of my talk is about trees of life and trees of death and everything in between. So I hope to compile this into a book form, and much of the work has been done. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is going to tell you about some iconic trees of this country. And in doing so, I will take you on a geographical tour of India from one corner to the other and make you crisscross so many states and boundaries to admire at some of the wonderfully good and great trees of this country. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to categorize iconic trees under these following 6 categories. They may be ancient specimens, oldest, very old trees, which may be survivors of a long gone age. They may be champions and giants having record dimensions. Third category is of trees of historical importance, as they may be linked to some event or personality. They may be botanical curiosities of some kind. They could be of trees of religious significance or cultural importance. And finally, I have even decided to include avenues and groves of particular importance or significance. Of course, I must tell you that some trees may belong to just one of the above categories, and there are many trees that may fit into more than one of the above categories. Hopefully, this work will encourage participation, preparation of national and state heritage registers or tree registers. It would hopefully create better awareness for tree protection, and I hope it will be useful to various bodies such as governments, biodiversity boards, experts in conservation, development planners, ecotourism specialists, students and teachers of botany, rural and urban communities, and so on. And in short, for everyone who is interested in nature. So let me start off with the first category of trees which are old and ancient in our country. You must have heard of the oldest trees in the world and so on. Many popular articles are published on such trees. But in India, we don't normally talk about which is the oldest tree in this country and which is the next oldest tree, or which is the oldest teak, which is the oldest this or that tree. In many developed countries, they have, especially America, Europe, Japan, and many other places, they determine precise age of trees through what is known as dendrochronology, which is a science which counts the annual rings or growth rings of trees, and they can tell you exactly that this tree is 3,124 years old as of today. We have a small group in India which practices dendroclimatology and dendrochronology. This was pioneered in your own city, in the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology near Pashan. And it is also, there are some wonderfully good people in the Birbal Sahni Institute of Lucknow and Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology. There are about 20 people, 20 experts in the country who do this dendroclimatology and dendrochronology. And some of them have accurately measured the age of trees. So by that reckoning, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, the oldest tree in India is a Himalayan pencil cedar, which is a species of juniperus, Juniperus macropoda. And this grows in Lahul in Himachal Pradesh, and it's close to 1600 years. This does not mean that there are no older trees than that, but as of today, This is the tree that is known to be the oldest from measurements of tree growth rings. The next oldest tree is a deodar. It is also done through dendrochronology and dendrochronology, which grows in Garhwal Himalayas, is close to 1200 years as of today. The third and the fourth trees are basically not, determined. Their age is not determined through tree ring dating, but through radiocarbon dating. And by that reckoning, there are two trees of Adansonia digitata, which is called the baobab. This is the oldest that we know, is one in a place called Kintur, in very close to Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh. It's close to about 800 years. Locally, it is called Parijata, and I would strongly dispute that, because this tree came from Africa to India, and it has come, with the trade link between Africa and India through the Arab route, and through also the trade of slaves from Africa to India and so on. So this could not be the Parijata, which is usually the candidate for Parijata is Nyctanthus arbotristis. But the local people say that this tree was brought by Arjun, who was asked to bring this down from heaven, from Indra's domain to India, to this place actually. The other tree, which is almost equally as old as this one, is in Allahabad. I think it's now called Prayagraj. This is also about 800 years old. Till all these things were done, we used to think that the sacred mulberry tree, which is a species of Morus serrata in Joshimath, was the oldest known tree in India. This is about 1200 years old. And how do we know that this is the oldest tree? Because Adi Shankara is supposed to have prayed under this tree or meditated under this tree while he was setting up his monastery in Joshimath. And since Adi Shankara's time was 8th century AD, this tree is close to 1200 years. It would be very interesting to do a radiocarbon dating on this tree to see whether it is older or at least 1200, or what is the exact situation. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of such trees. The oldest teak tree in India is what is known as Kannimara teak. Kannimara means literally in Malayalam, the virgin tree. And this tree is considered to be at least 500 years old, or maybe older than that. The coasts of Malabar and Canara in olden days were very famous for their teak. And people from Arab countries and far away used to come to these places to get boats built in teak. Even today, there are a couple of Japanese ship companies which come to get their boats built completely in teak. If you go to Calicut and that area, you will still find villages which specialize in making boats of that kind. And those ancient boats used to be made without even a single nail. And even such artists among them, skilled people exist there even today. Now, this particular tree, as I said, it was very deeply harvested, and there came a time when almost no trees were left for harvest. So the British, which were doing all these harvesting because they needed teak for shipbuilding, they realized that if they don't start plantations and growing teak soon, it will be lost and they will have a huge problem. So they started teak plantations around Nilambur in 1840. That is the world's oldest teak plantation. Now this tree actually is even older than 1840. And if you looked at this tree, Its height is about 48.5 meters. This is equivalent to about 15-story building. Now imagine how water is conducted to the tip of this tree in our own houses. If there is no water pump, the water will not reach that place. This tree stands there silently without making noise, without making any fuss, and conducts water from here to that place. 15 stories or even 16-story building. And its girth is 7.15 meters. It takes about 5 people with overstretched hands to actually embrace this tree. And in this picture, you will see Dr. Satish, who retired recently from the Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute in Trivandrum. And this is Mr. Harilal, who was the head publications in Calicut University. Both of them graciously accompanied me. Mr. Harilal tragically passed away in a road accident about 2 years ago. And this tree, if you go near this tree, it would remind you of Qutub Minar with its fluted columnar structure. And as I said, it would take over 5 people with stretched hands to embrace this tree. How did this tree escape the aches of the British? The story goes that because the tribal people there used to worship this tree as Kannimara, or virgin tree, and they said that this is the abode of the 7 virgin mothers, or Sapta Kanyakas, or 7 guardians angels. So somebody went to cut down this tree, and apparently blood gushed out of the trunk, and therefore this tree was spared. And this tree was decorated with the Mahavriksha Award. This was the first tree to get it in 1994. This is located in the Parambakulam Tiger Reserve in Kerala, and it is the pride of the Tiger Reserve. You may or may not see the tiger, but surely you will get a glimpse of this tree. From Kerala, now I'll take you to Kashmir. In Kashmir, whenever you are there, it is impossible to ignore the chinar tree. Chinar is Platanus orientalis. It is everywhere in the valley. It's in avenues, lakes, riverbanks, parks, gardens, households, religious places, even in their arts and crafts and literature and politics and their romance. In fact, Kashmiris think that it represents Kashmirianth, or it is a symbol of the Kashmiri people. You will heartily agree, except for the fact that chinar is not a native tree to Kashmir, but it is an immigrant here itself. Its natural home is somewhere in Europe, between Bulgaria and Iran. And the popular belief is that it came with the Mughals to Kashmir. The Mughals brought this tree when they came to India. However, Babur and Humayun never went to Kashmir. The first Mughal emperor to annex Kashmir was Akbar, and he went to the valley in 1585. And one of the 9 gems of his court, named Abul Fazl ibn Mubarak, he recorded the history of Akbar's era in a book called Akbarnama. And this Akbarnama has been translated into English, is available, and one can read this. And if you read this Akbarnama, Abul Fazl writes that in June 1589, when Akbar visited a place called Shadipura, which is there even today in the valley, they found a tree, a chinar tree, in the hollow trunk of which 34 soldiers could enter and sit. And Abul Fazl says that if they had tried harder and if they had sat closer, the hollow trunk could have accommodated probably even more people. Now today, you don't have such huge trees of chinar anywhere in the valley, but you have many grand specimens to be seen everywhere in and around Srinagar. The oldest tree is seen on your screen now. This is the oldest and the largest tree of chinar in the entire Jammu and Kashmir and therefore in India. And this is in a small village called Chatargam in Badgam district. You have to travel out of Srinagar and through the Badgam district. And this is in a small premises of a small mosque, which you can see here. And it's a grand specimen. And its girth is something like 15 meters. And it is considered to be close to 700 years in age. Now, 15 meters girth is a huge thing. And this tree is a very grand looking tree with so many birds making their home on its crown. And if you just stand under it, you can hear the bird calls, and it's very difficult for two people to talk because of all the noise that the birds are making. Now, if the Mughals saw old chinar trees when they entered Kashmir, then when did actually the chinar come to Kashmir? It is now considered that chinars have been introduced in the 14th century, clearly 200 years before the Mughals came. And there was a great Sufi reformer, poet, and itinerant scholar called Mir Syed Ali Hamdani, who came from Iran to spread Islam and to convert people of the Kashmir Valley in 1372. Several of his comrades followed him to different corners of the valley. One such person called Syed Qasim Shah chose this small village called Chatargam in Badgam district. He lived nearby in a cave, and this tree is supposed to have been planted by him. And when Syed Qasim Shah died, in fact, Syed Qasim Shah is supposed to have planted this in 1374. When Qasim Shah died, he was actually buried very close to this tree. Today, the tree has spread so wide that his burial place is no longer found. It has been subsumed under the roots of this tree. This tree was actually discovered by a man called M.S. Wadu, who was an official in the Kashmir Forestry Service in 2007. And it is probably one of the wonderfully large trees that I have ever seen in the entire Kashmir. There are so many beautiful trees in Kashmir, but this is the grandest and the oldest. Now, let's look at some trees which are champions with record dimensions. And there are some which have world records. For example, we have the largest ever tree in the entire planet. And this is a banyan tree. And of course, let me add a caveat here that to say largest, tallest, etc., you have to always add a footnote saying that what is the criterion that we are using to use these adjectives. Now, in this particular instance, we are using net canopy area, total area occupied by the canopy of the tree as seen in a two-dimensional Google map. And this particular tree is Timmamma Marrimanu, which is a banyan tree in a place called Gutibail in Anantapur district of Andhra Pradesh. And this tree has a net canopy area of 19,107 square meters. This is equivalent to 2.7 football fields, 2.7 football fields. This morning I was reading about the world's largest cashew nut tree, which is in Brazil. and it occupies an area of 2 football fields. Now this occupies an area of 2.7 football fields. And it has been calculated that 20,000 people could be accommodated under its canopy. A woman called Timamma committed sati during the 15th century. And the legend says that from her funeral pyre, one of the branches suddenly started sprouting leaves, and eventually it grew into this banyan tree. It looks like a mini forest, and it has got into the Guinness Book Records. Under this tree, there is a small shrine for Timamma, and she is considered to be the incarnation of Lakshmi. Now, the next second largest tree in the world is also an Indian tree, which is another banyan tree. It's in a place called Kabirwad near Bharuch in Gujarat. And if you look at the net canopy area, this is actually slightly smaller than Timamma Marimanu, and this is 17,520 square meters. But if you took the gross canopy area, Kabirwad would be the largest, and Timamma Marimanu would be the second largest. So if you take net canopy or gross canopy area, it depends what you consider, and it would exchange places. Now this tree is said to have been of Kabir's time, when Kabir actually, Saint Kabir actually was brushing his teeth with a datun, and after brushing his teeth, he just threw it into the Narmada river. And Kabirwad is in a small island between 2 branches of the Narmada, and this tree today occupies a large part of that island, river island. You have to reach this tree, you have to go in a boat to the island from the Narmada's banks. So this is an awesome looking tree there, and there is a small shrine for Kabir also in Kabirwad. Now we have a large tree called Kapok or Saiba pentandra. It is not an Indian tree, it came from South America, but it must have been introduced into India a very long time ago. And that is, the reason for saying that is that it has got names in many Indian languages, including Sanskrit. It is called Kutashalmali, and it is used in Ayurveda for a very long time. So this tree has reached India very long ago. Now, how did this tree, I will show a picture of this tree in a little later, and therefore I'll continue to talk about this. Then we have a very large tree. I'm just mentioning, if you have many more examples, I'm just giving you some examples. And I'll show you this tree, a picture of this tree, and I'll show you a picture of this tree. So here is the world's tallest rhododendron, which grows in Nagaland, close to Kohima. And this is growing on a small mountain. It's not really small. It's called the Japfu Mountain. Japfu Mountain is the second mountain in Nagaland after Mount Saramati. And it is very famous because it has very dense shrubs, climbers, lush green undergrowth, many gurgling streams rushing gradient. And it's considered quite a challenge to go trekking here and climb this Japfu Mountain. And in fact, I was there exactly a year ago, in last July 2019. And it was still rainy season there, and it was, somebody told me that it would just take about 40 minutes to climb up and 40 minutes to climb down, and whatever time I want to spend with this tree. I was thoroughly misled because it took us almost the whole day. We left around 9:30, And by 4 o'clock in the evening, I had not yet reached the summit of this tree where, summit of this mountain where this tree is growing. In fact, in Northeast, as you know, the sunset starts very early and it started becoming dark. And they told me, now you can't come here. So this was one tree that I could never end up seeing. Fortunately, my camera had gone ahead with the first party. And this gentleman is one of the persons who actually discovered this tree. His name is Donaipa Khale. And he and his colleague, Vijay Vayale Tachu, they are Angami Nagas and they go hunting in these mountains even now. And they were there in 1985. And Jakfu Mountain has several rhododendron species. Most of them are shrubs. And between March and May, the whole mountain becomes so colorful because of their flowers. Produces white flowers. Rhododendron arboreum produces red flowers. So this one is rhododendron arboreum with red flowers. Normally, the height of this tree are reaching up to something like 33 meters in height. So it immediately caught their attention. And both of them then went down and talked to the forestry officials. It took them nearly 10 years or about 9 years to move them. They took official measurements. They sent it to the Guinness Book of Records. In 1993, it was entered into the Guinness Book of Records. This tree. Another measurement taken in 2002 found that the tree has grown by something like 6 meters further, and it was close to 40 meters in height. Reading of the height, which I hope they will do, the Science and Technology Council of Nagaland. In fact, the Director, Science and Technology Council, Nagaland, Dr. Zavai, had organized this trip very graciously for me. And Donaipa Khale, who is still alive, close to 80, but he can climb and he would go so fast. And I could never catch up with him. The gradient was so is Nessa Talut, actually. She also works for the Science and Technology Council of Nagaland, a very good mountain climber herself. And this is the tree that they are trying to embrace. And tallest rhododendron arboreum in the stands. That record still. Now, this is the Saiba pentandra tree in Lal Bagh, Bangalore. Lal Bagh is a reputed garden of Bangalore. It was established by Hyder Ali, and later it was enlarged by Tipu. It was started around 1760. Tipu actually enlarged it. He imported several plants into this garden. And the popular belief is that this must have been introduced by Tipu Sultan into Lal Bagh. However, the garden was taken over by the British in 1865. Tipu was killed in 1799. Later it changed hands and went into private hands. And later the British took it back officially. And they had it in their custody between 1865 and 1947. And during this time, they expanded it. Even after 1950, Lal Bagh has been expanded. through acquisition of more land in and around it. Very recently, Dr. Harini Nagendra in Bangalore has done a wonderfully interesting study using a combination of historical maps and old paintings as well as remote sensing maps of today to determine where exactly Hyder Ali's and Tipu Sultan's Lal Bagh was and which are the parts which are added to later. Now, what they found was this particular tree is not in the part which belongs to the Hyder Ali or Tipu Sultan garden. In fact, it lies 200 meters away to the southwest of the Hyder Ali Tipu Sultan garden. And therefore, Tipu Sultan obviously did not import or get this plant. It must have, was it introduced by the British? So in 1861, so obviously this plant has been introduced or acquired sometime beyond 1861. Now today, if you look at this plant, I could not determine exactly who has introduced it, from which chunk of new introduction this tree came in, because there are no records at all available. If you looked at this tree, this is actually, this plant, this particular tree has jaw-dropping proportions. Now it's close to the west gate of Lal Bagh, and its height is about 26 meters tall. And what's most interesting is its girth is something like 23 meters. Its girth is as much as its height almost. See, it's considered to be about 200 to 225, 240 years. They make, cavities like this in which a full-grown adult could easily hide all around the tree. And its crown is like a colossal umbrella, which has 6,100 square meters area. And if you take a measurement of the circumference of this crown, it's about 170 meters. And this tree holds the world's record for girth for all kapok trees or Ceiba pentandra trees. And as I mentioned, this is a native tree of tropical America, must have been introduced into India very early because it has names in every Indian language. And this is an awesome looking tree. And next time you people go to Lal Bagh, please don't forget to look at this tree. It produces flowers, but nobody has seen fruits on the tree. There is something of a sterility problem. Flowers are produced every year. Trees in its neighborhood, there are other trees like this which are quite large but not so large. They all produce fruits and seeds and flowers, but this particular tree never produces fruits. Now let's move on to some trees of historical significance. So I'll give you some examples. I don't know whether any of you can say who actually introduced eucalyptus to India. The answer to this is it was Tipu Sultan, who for the first time introduced eucalypts from Australia sometime during 1790s. And he introduced them into a hill called Nandi Hills. It's a very famous tourist resort, very close to Bangalore. And several species, in fact, it turns out that he imported 16 species of eucalyptus into Nandi Hills. Most of them are still there. You can still go and see them. I don't want to spend too much time because if I keep talking about every tree that I'm showing you, this lecture will never end. There is a tree of banyan in Ras village in Gujarat. All of you have heard of the Dandi Salt March of 1930, which is a landmark in the freedom struggle. And in fact, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was very key person in charting out the route for this Dandi March from Sabarmati Ashram to this village, coastal village of Dandi. And he went before the Dandi March, ahead of the Dandi March, to canvass support for civil disobedience movement in all the places where Gandhiji and his team were likely to stay and stop during the march. The march took 24 days, and at every place, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel went to exhort people. And while he was giving a talk under this banyan tree in Ras village, he was actually arrested on 7th July 7th March 1930. And you can still see this tree there. There is also another banyan at Dandi itself, where Mahatma Gandhi spoke immediately breaking the salt law. And there is this wonderful chinar garden in a place called Beej Behra. This was actually of Norbugang. Norbugang is an important place in Sikkim. In the history of Sikkim, it plays a very significant
नटेश सर बहुतेक एक्झिट झालेले दिसत आहे. त्यांच्याकडे कदाचित थोडा प्रॉब्लेम असेल नेटचा असं वाटतंय. पुन्हा येतील ते. आपण थांबू थोडा वेळ.
Sorry.
Yeah. आपल्या हातात नाही ना ते. पण त्यांनी जी लास्ट ट्री मध्ये इम्प्रेशन केली टाकलं.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, my apologies for this interruption. One of the hazards of using technology. I would have preferred to see you in person and talk to you in person, but then I'm very sorry for this. So can you see the slide on the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So there was a great religious turmoil in Tibet in the middle of 17th century. And a man called Lakson Chembo, who was a lama of the Nyingma sect, and they are popularly known as Red Hats, he fled Tibet to escape execution. So he came all the way from somewhere here and traveled south to a place called Yoksum. And he came to a place called Norbu Gang. It was very close to this. He came here all the way from Tibet. And can you see this arrow? So those days, this entire area was called Denzong. And that is today's Sikkim. And after much wandering, he reached this place, Norbugang. And this place, he met two other lamas who had also fled Tibet and fled here. And they traveled all this distance. So they held a brief parley, the main purpose of which was to establish a Buddhist monarchy in what they thought was this this irreligious place. So basically, they decided that they needed a fourth person who would help them in their mission. So they started looking for a fourth person who would join hands with them. And their search ended with the discovery of a person called Phuntsung Namgyal. And he was found somewhere in this eastern part of what is now Sikkim, somewhere near Gangtok. And when they met, they actually struck an alliance between them. He said that he would help them establish, or he would be making sure that this would be a Buddhist kingdom that he would establish with their blessing. So on an auspicious day in 1641, the lamas poured holy water on Phuntsung Namgyal and coronated him, or declared him the monarch or sovereign of the new kingdom. And this coronation, actually, the ceremony was conducted on a four-seated rubble platform, stone platform. So here sat Latsun Chembo, who was the chief monk or chief lama. The two other lamas sat on his left side. On his right side, Phuntsung Namgyal, the king, sat. And they gave him the title of Chogyal. Now, Sikkim kings were known as Chogyals, as you remember, which means religious and temporal rulers. And for the next 12 generations, the Namgyals of Gangtok ruled Sikkim for 333 years, and their rule ended in 1975 when Sikkim became the 22nd state of India. Now, this is the stone throne on which Phuntsung Namgyal, the first Chogyal, was actually coronated. To commemorate this event, the chief monk, Latsun Chembo, planted his wooden walking stick behind the throne. And this tree of Chinese weeping cypress is supposed to have grown from his walking stick and planted in 1641. Now, let me tell you that weeping cypresses are Chinese weeping cypresses, which is botanically Cypressus funebris, does not grow in the wild in India at all. It is grown only under cultivation. And it is actually called weeping cypress because if you looked at these branches and the leaves, they droop down after going up. The branches go slightly up and then droop down like this. And the leaves also droop down. So it is called weeping cypress or funereal cypress. That's why it's called Cypressus funebris. It's also called mourning cypress because the branches and the leaves droop down in mourning, as they say. And there are some beautiful weeping cypress trees in and around Yuksam. Also, the first Buddhist monastery in Sikkim was in a place called Dubdi. It's called Dubdi Monastery. It's a wonderfully beautiful monastery. There are so many Chinese weeping cypresses planted there, some of which has been recorded by J.D. Hooker in his Himalayan journal. Actually, this tree is about 380 years now in age, and its girth is close to about 5 meters. And today, this whole area is preserved by the Archaeological Survey of India. And in memory of the meeting of three great monks, this place was called Yuksam, which means the meeting place of three religious people. And Yuksam was the capital of the first kingdom, or the first capital of Sikkim. This was changed twice more, and Gangtok is the fourth capital of Sikkim today. And this particular tree is next to the stone throne and represents the historical event of the coronation of the first Chogyal of Sikkim. And in fact, this entire area is today part of the Kanchenjunga National Park, and it is one of the UNESCO heritage sites of India. It's in fact the 35th World Heritage Site in India, which has been recognized by UNESCO. And it is a heritage site both for natural and cultural reasons, because of the history and culture, as well as for natural biodiversity. And this is the only such mixed heritage site for culture and nature in India. Now, let me mention one more historical tree to you before I move on. And this picture that you see here is of Adansonia digitata, or the baobab. I mentioned Adansonia digitata, the oldest ones found in India are about 800 years old, age. I mentioned two of those which are carbon dated, one from Kintur, the other one from Allahabad. And this particular tree is a very historic baobab tree. It is in a place called Bijapur in northern Karnataka. Bijapur used to be the capital of the Adil Shah kings. And they used this particular tree as a tree under which they executed their enemies, both political and other enemies, including thugs and thieves and enemies of their state. And this is, I saw this tree and photographed this tree in 2014. And in 2015, this tree actually suddenly collapsed and died. This photo was taken, these two are taken by the newspaper, The Hindu. And this photograph was taken by The Hindu on 24th June. On 13th August, this tree suddenly collapsed and died. Now, there are various studies on why or what could be the reasons for baobabs to stand one day healthily and next day suddenly they will collapse and die. Many of you in Pune might recall a beautiful baobab tree in front of the main building of the Pune University. It collapsed and died about 5-6 years ago. It was one of the most beautiful trees on the campus of the Pune University when I used to be a student. Now, this particular tree was just outside the Bijapur city at that time. And a man called Meadows Taylor, he was a British, he was an English person, but he was not in the employ of the East India Company, but he served the Maharaja of, the Nizam of Hyderabad. And he was an administrator, and among other things, he was also a very successful author and novelist, historical novels. One of the novels that he has written is called Tara, and this was written in 1863. And this is a historical romance between a Hindu girl and a Muslim boy. And the Muslim boy belongs to the Adil Shah. He was a soldier, or high-ranking official in the army. And this girl called Tara, they fall in love, etc., etc. But in the background of this romance, he has brought in a lot of history of the time when the Adil Shahi kingdom was on its decline. It was the sunset period for the Adil Shahi's kingdom. And also the rise of Shivaji in Maharashtra. And those of you who have not read this book must read this. It makes wonderfully great reading. And most of these books are today available, downloadable on the internet for free. In fact, in this book, Meadows Taylor mentions this particular tree 17 times in his novel. And later, a man called James Douglas wrote a book called Bombay and Western India in 1893. There is a photograph of a baobab in the tree, which I think is of this same tree. And if you look at the Cook's Flora of the Presidency of Bombay and go to Malvasia in it, Cook writes that this is the tree mentioned by Meadows Taylor in 1863 in his romantic novel Tara. And it stands still there in Bijapur at that place. So this tree suddenly collapsed in 2015. Now, there are 2-3 groups working on Adansonias around the world. One is a New Zealand and Belgium group led by a lady called Haripriya, Ranganath. And there is another group of people working from Europe. And all of them have been studying how baobabs came to India. They came, as I mentioned earlier, through the Arab route, through the slaves who were traded into India. And it is now found that out of something like 19 oldest and largest baobabs across the world, 14 of them have died in the last few years very suddenly. Nobody knows why they died. And they haven't included our baobabs. I would mention this baobab, and I would mention the Pune University baobab, which also died within this period. And while they were not the oldest or the largest baobabs, but they still died in that period. Nobody knows why, although the author speculated climate change is one of the reasons for it. And be that as it may, but this tree, after I had written about and photographed it, it died, and therefore it gave me the idea that I must now add a new chapter listing out all the historic or iconic trees which existed but died recently. So I have a whole list of such trees which are no more and died recently. I will also mention another tree of death. There are many such trees which have been involved in the freedom struggle of 1857. One of them is in Bareilly, close to Delhi, and Lucknow. In fact, it is a triangle. There, during 1857, there was this whole place called, Rohilas, who were ruling this area. And under this man called Khan Bahadur Khan, the soldiers and people united, and they declared Bareilly and its neighboring areas free from British rule. And in fact, Bareilly had the longest free period out of the British rule. It lasted for something like 10 months and 5 days or something like that, during which period they minted their own coin. And this is something unique. Bareilly has been very famous from before Christian era to the period during 1850, 1860. It has been minting coins, and there is an old place very close to Bareilly, which is still there as a tourist interest. Now, the British finally caught up with Khan Bahadur Khan. He was caught and hanged in the Bareilly jail. But 257 of his supporters were supposed to have been hanged on this banyan tree. And today there is a column, an obelisk, which commemorates this sacrifice of 257 people during the freedom struggle. And I can name so many such trees. There is a whole list of such trees which were used by the British. Why did the British use banyan or people to hang criminals or what they perceived as rebels or criminals. They were obviously aware that Indians hold banyans and peepals as very revered and sacred trees. There is no evidence to indicate that they deliberately chose them, but nevertheless, they chose banyan and peepal trees to hang people, probably because they were very sturdy or something like that. Although it doesn't pertain to this particular example of Bareilly, I will give you uh, a picture. This is a woodcut which was in a book taken from a book written during that period by a soldier, a British soldier. Uh, I cannot say what form of trial the prisoners underwent or what evidence was recorded against them. I merely know they were marched up in batches and shortly after marched back again to a large tree of the banyan species, which stood in the center of the square and hung thereon. This went on from about 3 o'clock in the evening till daylight the following morning, when it was reported that there was no more room on the tree. And by that time, there were 130 men hanging from its branches. A grim spectacle indeed. And this was also what must have happened at Bareilly as well. People of the town were compelled to witness this as a method of striking terror and to show British might and supremacy during their period. And I have many such trees in my list, which have been used by various kinds of people to execute rebels, criminals, political opponents, and so on and so forth. Now, quickly mention trees of some cultural or religious importance. There is a tree in Manipur, which is of great significance to the Nagas, and I will talk about that slightly. There is this Chatim tree in Shantiniketan, which Maharshi Devendranath Tagore initially sat under them and meditated, and he was so filled with peace that he bought up this entire land tract there and made his retreat for spiritual activities and named it Shantiniketan. And today, this place where the trees existed is called Chatim Tala. The original trees are gone, but the tradition of showing reverence to Elstonia scholars or Chatim tree, which is called Saptaparni in Sanskrit, is still alive because they give leaflets of this
पुन्हा नटेश सरांचं नेट कनेक्शन डिस्टर्ब झालेलं दिसतंय.
Natesh sir is trying to reconnect. Please bear. There is some problem with his internet connection.
Examples of the religious trees. The most famous one and most well known is the Bodhi tree, which is in Bodh Gaya. I could spend a whole lecture speaking about the Bodhi tree, and I would desist from that. There is this mulberry tree of Joshimath, about which I already spoke to you. It's about 1200 years old. In your own neighborhood, very close to Pune, there is this Ajan Vraksh, which is associated with Sant Gyaneshwarji Maharaj. Then you have a tree in Rajasthan, which is associated with the Jain Tirthankar, first Tirthankar Adinath, and so on. And this is that particular tree, the one which is associated with Adinath, in a place called Ranakpur, which has a 15th century temple. Now this temple is designed like a celestial aeroplane. It's called Nalini Gulma Viman. So it's actually a flying machine which was conceived in the 15th century. A very devout Jain called Dharana Shah dreamt of this one day in his dream. And morning he got up and he was filled with a desire to actually convert what he saw in his dream into an actual temple. And he looked for some architects. In fact, he went to the king, and the king was Rana Kumbha. And he said, I will give you some land, provided you name it after me. Therefore, it is called Ranakpur, although Dharna Shah was the one who financed it and got it built. So the next challenge was to find an architect who would actually translate his dream. He tried several people and nobody came up to scratch. Finally, he went to a reclusive, eccentric fellow called Deepak, who came up with a drawing which was absolutely something like Dharna Shah had actually dreamt of. And then legend says that it took them 50 years for thousands of people to work. And this is in marble. And you can see that it is in 3 levels, this particular tree, particular temple. And it was actually meant to commemorate Adinatha, the first Tirthankara among 24 Tirthankaras of importance in Jainism. And this particular tree, which they call locally as Ryan tree, and it is Manilkara hexandra, which is Sapota family or Sapotaceae family. And it exists on the top rung of this temple, very close to the sanctum. Other than this tree, there is not a single blade of grass anywhere inside this temple. And this tree stands something like 45 feet above ground in the top rung. And it is something like 400 to 600 years old. It still bears flowers and fruits. And it's an absolute marvel in this marvelous temple. I must tell you that this temple has 420 pillars and not one of them is similar to the other. Every pillar has a different design, different carving on it. And it's absolutely great to see both this temple and this tree. And why this particular tree with Adinatha? Because Adinatha is supposed to have obtained enlightenment under this Kirni tree or Ryan tree. And it's absolutely hollow, its main trunk, but it is still standing there, and one can see this today. Very briefly, I will mention this particular plant from northern part of Manipur, which is called a village called Makhel in Senapati district. This is a tree which is a species of ficus called Ficus virens. And this is cordoned off into an enclosure because this is a very important tree in the cultural history of the Nagas. There is a debate on where the Naga people, so many tribes are there today. Where did they come from into India? There are many theories. Some people say that they came through Myanmar from Philippines or Indonesia, somewhere in that region. Some say they came from China, but be that as it may, they all came and settled in this place called Makhel in Senapati district. And the story goes that the ancestral mother of all the human beings, that is according to the Naga theory, was one day resting under this tree. Now the legend doesn't say where the ancestral mother herself came from. Although she gave birth to the rest of the humanity, according to this legend, she was resting under this tree, and suddenly she was enveloped by clouds and she was impregnated. And she produced 3 offspring. The firstborn was tiger, which is representative of all the wildlife and forestry animals and plants, animals basically. And the second one was a supernatural being representing the supernatural regime. And the third born and the youngest was a human being. And this tree is considered extremely ancient. It has so many epiphytes growing on this. You can see these caladiums growing on it. And Nagas hold this tree very sacred. And just next to the left side of this tree is this chief's house. Every tribe has a chief. And this is the Mao Nagas village. And this is the chief's house. In fact, I might mention this to you as an aside. The of the Botanical Survey of India is a Mao Naga. And if he were not the director of the Botanical Survey of India, a good friend of mine, he would have been the village chief and would have been living here probably. And look at this beautiful thing with bison horns and so on. And this is an ancient tree, and I could tell you stories about this, but let me move on. Finally, botanical curiosities. Some examples of a mango tree with 350 grafts. This is in a place called Malihabad, and there is a man who owns a nursery there, and he has made more than 350 grafts on a single mango tree, and this is the record in itself. And he is a man of many parts. He has been awarded the Padma Shri for this. In Maharashtra, very close to Satara, there is another person who does that, but he has just about 150 or 180 grafts on his mango tree. I have talked to him, but I immediately can't recall his name. There is absolutely the loneliest tree in India, and this is a giant sequoia, which is Sequoiadendron sempervirens. The only such tree, not only in India, but the entire South Asia, in a place near Gulmarg in Kashmir. And then there is the double coconut tree. There is only one tree, which is a female tree in the Kolkata Botanic Garden. And there is a lovely story about it, but it will take me time to talk to you about it, so I'll pass on. Then there is a banyan tree, which has more than 600 beehives on it. It's a record of sorts. The earlier record beehives on a single tree, but this had more than 600 beehives on it. So I will just show you pictures of this and not get into too much of detail because it's getting late. And this is that Sequoiadendron giganteum tree, which grows, and it is endemic to the mountains of California. How did this get here is a mystery. It produces male and female cones, but seeds never germinate here. And the good thing is it grows in the field station of the Indian Institute of Integrated Medicine in Jammu, which has a field station in a place called Yarika. And it is about 90 years old today. And this is the only tree of its kind, as I said, in the entire South Asia. The people of that institute, the director has got 2 paintings of this tree done by a very famous person called K.K. Gandhi. Sorry. He is a Jammu-based painter, and one painting hangs in Jammu in his institute. Another painting is in Lucknow in the Central Drug Research Institute. And this is the tree that hosts millions of bees virtually. And the largest record has been of 630 beehives on a single tree here. It grows in a place called Ramagovindapura, and it is a banyan tree. And lastly, this is the last section that I have on trees, iconic tree groves and plantations. There is a tamarind grove near Bangalore, which is of Chola vintage. The oldest tea plantation in the world is what is known as Connolly's plot in Nilambur, established in 1840. Naseem Bagh in Srinagar has been established during Jahangir's time, full of chinars, and later supported and expanded by Akbar. It is now absorbed into the campus of the University of Kashmir at Srinagar. And here is I can give you many other examples, but this is some trees of tamarind from the Nallur tamarind grove. So I could have shown you many more examples, but these are the kinds of trees that will feature in my work. And as I said, I have captured them under 6 headings. And the good thing is I travel all over the country, and I hope I have given you a glimpse of how it is to go from one end of India to the other, full of heritage, full of history, full of culture, full of wonderfully interesting people, and lots of interesting things to learn about. And I hope you have enjoyed this. I'm very sorry, and my apologies for the 2 breaks that had to punctuate my talk because of internet failure. And once again, I'm saying I'm very sorry for that. Finally, let me thank the organizers. I wish Dr. Rajit were here. I'm told that he is indisposed a bit. I wish him a speedy recovery. And I thank all of you. I know that you are a very knowledgeable community and very committed people in defense of nature. Finally, this picture is that you see on your screen is taken from India-Pakistan border. You see this fence here. This is the border. And I was there again last year. And I was told that there is a peepal tree there which falls in the no man's land between Pakistan and India. They won't let me take my camera. With a lot of pleading, they allowed me to take my cell phone. And a soldier from the Indian side had to accompany me so that I won't be shot down from the Pakistani side. And unfortunately, or for whatever, I'm not showing you that particular people tree pictures here today, but it is exactly in the no man's land. Earlier, it was one of the posts, numbered posts, and the tree was the post was engulfed by this peepal tree. And you can still see that the post with bearing, I think the number was 850 or something like that. It is still peeping out of the one gap in the trunk. I wish I had shown you that picture. And this is the sunset at that place. This place is called Suchetgarh, which is close to Jammu, but it is on the border with Pakistan. And finally, I thank all of you for your great patience. And in case you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you very much. Over to the organizer.
We will take 1 or 2 questions, not more than that. Please, you can ask your questions in chat mode, and others can directly email the questions to Natesh Sir. Natesh Sir, can you please show your last slide on which you have email is there, so that if anybody is interested, he can ask the question on an email, since we are already late.
You want to see the last slide?
Yeah, on the your email.
The last slide, okay. Is this the slide there you want to see, or which slide?
Yeah. This is the slides. There is the email of
Okay.
Natesh, and you can note down the email and ask him the questions on mail directly, since we are already late. I will like to request Mahajan sir, I am unmuting Mahajan sir, to thank Natesh sir on behalf of all of us for this wonderful presentation, and we are all eagerly looking forward to your book, Natesh sir. Thank you very much. Mahajan sir,
Thank you.
unmute केलंय तुम्ही, thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Natesh, for your wonderful lecture and the beautiful slides you have shown. Actually mind-blowing and brainstorming lecture. I want to add one more thing about the Pune University baobab tree. It collapsed about 5 or 6 years ago, but it is still living. It is not. It is not dead. So it did not die, and the many branches have been sprouted from the horizontal trunk column, and the branches are growing nicely now.
Okay, that's
Thank you very
interesting.
much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for being patient, and thank you Natesh sir for this wonderful presentation. It was simply mind-blowing to know so many things, and we'll look forward to hear more from you. We'd like to arrange a follow-up lecture also, if possible. We'll be grateful for another lecture too, sir.
Thank you.
बंद करायचं म्हणतेस?
Thanks to everyone. Thank you, and sorry for the interruptions.
कुठे नाही sir?
No, sir, no problem. And one more request. We have started this Weekend Warriors lecture series so that many people can know much more things about the nature, different facets of nature. And we are requesting for a nominal contribution of ₹1,000. Those who have not paid yet, I request all of them, if they are satisfied with these lectures, please contribute and help Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini to carry out its different programs. You can email missiondevarai@gmail.com for details, or you can contact me, Sunil Bide. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am ending the meeting now. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody. Once again, thanks Natesh sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
भिडे सर, पुढचा लेक्चरचा थोडासा बोला ना.
पुढचं जे लेक्चर आहे 25 तारखेला नागपंचमीच्या दिवशी आपण रानभाज्या किंवा आपल्या शहरामध्येही आढळणाऱ्या तणाच्या रूपातल्या भाज्या याच्यावर आपण लेक्चर ठेवलेलं आहे. लेक्चर देणार आहेत कल्पवृक्ष ग्रुपची लोक. प्रदीप चव्हाण सर बोलणार आहेत, आणि आपण सगळ्यांनी जरूर हे इंटरेस्टिंग लेक्चर ऐकायला या. वेगळं लेक्चर असेल. या रानभाज्या आपण ओळखू शकत नाही. या रानभाज्या कशा ओळखायच्या, त्याची काय पद्धतीत असतात, आणि संवर्धन करायचंय त्याचं. त्या रानभाज्या काढायच्या नाहीयेत, आपल्या जवळपासच्या रानभाज्या ओळखायच्या आहेत आणि त्याचा वापर करून घ्यायचा आहे, असा या लेक्चरचा मुख्य उद्देश असेल. तर आपण प्रदीप चव्हाणांकडनं ते सगळं जाणून घेऊया पुढच्या शनिवारी संध्याकाळी 6 वाजता. थँक्यू.
थँक्यू व्हेरी मच. थँक्स ऑल. थँक्स नटेश सर.
थँक्यू. मी मीटिंग एंड करतोय. थँक्यू.
येस.